So I've got all the valves out of the machine now, 10 of them. Got 4 6AK5s, or the equivalents, there's a couple of military equivalents there, CV850s. We've got an 85A2 rectifier, 12AU7 output, and 2 6AQ5s. The rectification is a 5Z4. And then also part of the power supply is a 6CD6G, and I wanted to just show you this because I haven't tested any of these yet, but all of the cubes look okay, with the exception of this one. There's 2 problems with this, and this one has an anode cap, and what tends to happen in very old machines that don't get a lot of use is that the anode caps corrode in their holders, and then when you try and separate them, in other words take the lead away from the anode cap, they're stuck, and what can happen is that they can become detached from the valve. They just pull off effectively. Now this is not an uncommon problem. I actually prefer the sort of clip-on anode leads rather than the ones which have the entire circular junction that fits onto the cap, so that you can actually lever them off easily rather than putting any tension on the anode cap of the valve themselves. So what I've done is I've had a look in the microscope, and the actual anode lead itself looks as though it's okay going down into the valve. The valve itself doesn't look as though it's outgassed, so I believe that the junction is still good where the anode passes down through the top of the valve. I've desoldered all of the solder off the top of the cap, and I've checked that there is enough length of anode lead so it goes out through the top of the cap and can be resoldered. So that means I just need to fix the cap on to the top of the valve, and I'll use some high heat glue, just a little spot just to put it on, let it cure, and I can just quickly solder the top of the lead back onto the cap, and then that hopefully will be a good repair. The other issue with this one is again a common issue with octal base valves especially, is that people pull them in and out using the glass rather than the base. And this one might be a bit difficult for you to see, but the base itself, maybe you can hear that, moves, so the glass enclosure is not properly bonded to the base anymore. So it's still bonded to the 5 pins, but clearly you can't really leave it like this because fatigue will over time will fatigue the wires as they go down into the pins. So again, not an uncommon problem. So all we're going to use is a little micro hypodermic type nozzle, and we're just going to direct some shellac down into that gap, and make sure that we get a good coating down in there. Leave it so that it's upright to dry, probably about 4, 6, 8 hours, maybe overnight if you can, and that will just rebond the glass enclosure to the base. And it's pretty good under heat as well. So rather than gluing, especially never use crazy glue or super glue on valves, because the heat will cause them to outgas, and there's all sorts of nasty chemicals that they can outgas. So shellac is the stuff that I use, seems to work very well for me. And we'll do that and see whether or not we can repair this valve so that we can test it again and hopefully reinsert it back into the machine. Okay, so I'll get on and I'll start mending that valve, and then at a later stage we'll get the tester out and we'll test them all, make sure they're all good before we put them back in the machine. Just a quick update on the valves for the TF1101. I've had a look at all the valves that came out of the unit, and I found that they're all absolutely fine, with the exception of one of the The EF95s, 6 AK5s, this one here, which is weak. So I've gone into my stash and found a nice vintage one. This is a Mallard, so we'll replace the weak valve with that one there. So the last one then to look at is the 6CD6. You remember from previous video we had some problems with this. The cap had effectively perished within its housing, and then that came away, the anode cap came away from the valve when I removed it, and also the glass enclosure was loose within the base. So what I've done is I've used some shellac and just applied very thin layers of shellac all the way around the bottom of the base whilst the tube is standing upright, and that now has completely solved the issue with the base and the enclosure being loose. So that's nice and solid now, so as long as I remember never to take the valve out by the glass, always use the base, then that should be fine. I've also reattached the anode cap, resoldered the anode itself onto the top of the cap, and to secure the cap to the glass I've used some of this stuff here, which is JB Weld High Heat. So this is good apparently up to, I think it's 220 degrees sustained, 260 peak, that's centigrade. So hopefully that will do the job. And indeed it looks, or it feels like the cap is, very well secured onto that. So all we've got to do now really is test the valve. So I've broken out the Heath kit, TC3, set it up already for this valve, CD6, C6CD6. So let's give it a go. So let's attach the anode first of all. Put the valve in. If we can find where it goes. There it is. Quite a bit of voltage drop on these, so we just need to bring the line up again. And I have got a filament glow, so that's a good sign. So let's start off with the shorts test then. So I'm looking for the short light here not to illuminate. I'm just going through all the connections here as on the data sheet. And they all look fine, so the tube should be well warm now, so let's give it a go. Okay, so it's on the bottom end of good, so we've still got some life in the tube. And everything looks normal. So I think we can put this tube back in. This is not going to be a unit that we we put a lot of use on, so I'm quite happy with having that valve there. In fact, I put the line up a little bit and do it again. Yeah, that's fine. 64. Not the strongest tube in my collection, but good enough for this.